Let me ask you something. Have you ever had a day so normal, so routine, that you thought nothing could go wrong? But then out of nowhere, everything changes and you're caught in a situation you never saw coming. This is one of those days. A simple traffic stop that turns into something much more intense. And trust me, the officer in this story never expected what happened next. But before we get into the details, let's go back to where it all started. It's a warm afternoon. The sun is hanging lazily in the sky, casting long shadows across the neighborhood. Birds are chirping, and the breeze carries a sense of calm over the quiet streets. A black man walks down the sidewalk, dressed in a sharp suit, minding his own business. He's not in a rush, just going about his day, his mind elsewhere. He's probably thinking about work, or maybe something as simple as what he'll have for dinner later. He doesn't realize his life is about to take a very sharp turn. A police cruiser slowly drives by. Inside, Officer Daniels is on patrol. He's been with the force for years, but over time, his instincts have become less about justice and more about judgment. As the man catches his eye, Daniels feels something stir inside him, something dark. There's no real reason for him to stop, but something about the man, specifically the color of his skin, triggers Daniels' suspicion. In his mind, this man doesn't belong in this part of town. Without thinking twice, Daniels hits the brakes. The man, John, notices the police car, but doesn't think much of it. He's done nothing wrong. Why would he be worried? But as the cruiser comes to a stop and the officer steps out, there's a shift in the air. John feels it immediately, though he stays calm, composed. After all, he's got nothing to hide, right? Daniels walks over to John with a swagger that speaks volumes. He's in control here, or at least he thinks he is. "Hey, what are you doing around here?" Daniels asks, his voice carrying a hint of accusation even though John has done nothing to deserve it. John looks at him, a little confused but still polite. "Just walking, officer. Is there a problem?" Daniels doesn't respond right away. Instead, his eyes narrow, scanning John up and down, searching for something, anything that might justify his growing suspicion. "Where are you headed?" Daniels asks, but this time there's an edge to his voice. John remains calm, giving a simple answer. "Just heading home." But that answer doesn't sit well with Daniels. He doesn't like how calm John is, how confident he seems. To him, that's a sign of guilt, not innocence. "You got ID on you?" The officer barks, his tone turning colder. John, still composed, nods and reaches for his wallet, pulling out his ID. He hands it over without hesitation, but Daniels snatches it from his hand, clearly trying to assert dominance. As Daniels looks over the ID, the air between them grows thicker. There's no real reason for this stop, no crime being committed, but Daniels isn't letting it go. "What brings you to this part of town?" he asks again, as if he didn't believe the first answer. John, slightly irritated but still keeping his cool, repeats himself. "I told you, I'm just heading home." But Daniels isn't interested in the truth. He's interested in control. He steps closer, his posture more aggressive now. "You got anything on you? Drugs? Weapons?" John's eyes widen in disbelief. "No, officer. Why would I?" But Daniels isn't listening. He's already made up his mind. Without warning, Daniels grabs John's arm. "Turn around, put your hands behind your back," he orders. John's calm demeanor falters for the first time. "Wait, what? What's this about?" he asks, genuinely confused. "You're under arrest," Daniels snaps. John tries to remain calm, but his mind is racing. "For what?" he asks, but Daniels doesn't answer. Instead, he's already slapping the cuffs on, pulling John toward the police car. John doesn't resist, but inside he's boiling. He knows this isn't right. He knows this is about one thing, the color of his skin. John sits in the back of the police car, his wrists sore from the tight handcuffs. He doesn't say much, but his mind is racing. He's thinking about how quickly everything spiraled out of control. He was just walking home, minding his business, and now he's under arrest for no reason. He watches as Daniels sits in the front seat, smug and satisfied, typing away at the computer, processing the arrest. John could say something, but he doesn't. He knows what's about to happen, and he's waiting for the right moment. Daniels feels good. He thinks he's done his job, gotten another suspicious person off the streets. As he types in John's information, he's barely paying attention, just going through the motions. But then something happens. The computer screen blinks, and suddenly Daniels freezes. His smug expression fades as he stares at the screen, confusion washing over his face. He types in the name again, thinking he must have made a mistake. But no, the result is the same. Daniel's heart starts to race. This can't be right. It doesn't make sense. Daniels turns to look at John in the back seat, his face pale, his hands shaking. John just sits there, calm and composed, watching the officer unravel. "You didn't check my ID properly, did you?" John finally says, his voice steady but carrying a weight that makes Daniel's stomach drop. Daniels doesn't respond, but his silence speaks volumes. John leans forward slightly, his eyes locking onto Daniels. "I'm an FBI agent," he says, his words hitting Daniels like a punch to the gut. Daniel's mind is spinning. He tries to speak, but the words catch in his throat. How could this happen? He was so sure, so certain that this was just another random guy he could push around. But now everything has flipped upside down. He's not dealing with some random person. He's dealing with someone who could destroy his career in an instant. Daniel scrambles to find an excuse, something to justify his actions, but it's too late. John has already seen everything he needs to see. John doesn't yell. He doesn't threaten. He just sits there, calm and collected, watching Daniels fall apart. "You see," John says quietly, "this is why people like you shouldn't be in positions of power. You think you can judge someone just by looking at them. You think you can treat people like they're less than human. But today, you picked the wrong guy." His words are calm, but they cut deep. Daniels is left speechless, realizing the full weight of his mistake. The story doesn't end with the arrest. After John's identity is revealed, the situation quickly escalates. The FBI gets involved, and an internal investigation into Daniels' conduct is launched. He's suspended from duty, and his career is hanging by a thread. Word spreads fast, both within the department and the community. This isn't just about one officer making a mistake. It's about a system that allowed him to act on his prejudice without question. Daniels is no longer in control. He's now at the mercy of the very system he once thought he controlled. The story catches the attention of the media. News outlets pick it up, headlines reading, "FBI agent wrongfully arrested by local cop in shocking incident of racial profiling." Daniels becomes the face of everything wrong with law enforcement. People are talking about how this is just one example of a bigger problem, about how many others like John don't get the chance to fight back, to prove their innocence. For John, it's not just about what happened to him that day. He knows he's lucky. Not everyone gets to walk away from a situation like this unharmed. He's seen too many cases where people in his position don't make it out alive. But he also knows that his calm reaction and his decision to wait for the right moment to reveal his identity were key to how things played out. He's angry, but he channels that anger into something more productive. Instead of seeking revenge, he pushes for change. He becomes a voice in the conversation about police reform and racial justice, using his experience to highlight the systemic issues that so many people face daily. As for Daniels, his life takes a sharp turn. The internal investigation into his behavior doesn't go well. His past comes back to haunt him. Other complaints, ones that were swept under the rug, are now being re-examined. It turns out this isn't the first time Daniels has let his bias influence his work, but it might be the last. He's suspended indefinitely, facing potential charges for misconduct. His reputation is shattered, and his future in law enforcement is in serious jeopardy. He goes from being a cop who thought he had control over others to a man whose career is slipping through his fingers. As the days pass, John becomes more vocal about his experience. He doesn't just see this as an isolated incident, but as part of a much larger issue. John knows that while he had the status and position to protect him, many others are not so fortunate. He starts speaking out, not only in the media, but also at public events, police reform panels, and community discussions. "What happened to me," John says in one interview, "happens to people who don't have the privilege of fighting back. And those stories don't always end as well as mine did." His words resonate with people. They understand that John's calm demeanor during the arrest was not just about his personal strength, but about the unspoken rules many black men and women follow when they are confronted by the police. He knows the stakes, and his survival depended on not escalating the situation. John's story is about more than just one interaction. It's about a lifetime of navigating a world where the color of his skin is seen as suspicious before any words are even spoken. The incident ignites a broader conversation about systemic racism and policing. News outlets start interviewing experts on racial profiling, showing statistics on how often black people are stopped, searched, and arrested compared to their white counterparts. People begin questioning the training and culture within police departments that allow officers like Daniels to act on bias without consequence, until now. This case isn't just about one bad cop. It's about how the system itself creates and perpetuates these problems. In John's community, the reaction is mixed. Some are outraged, not surprised by what happened, and deeply concerned about the safety of their own family members. Others see hope in how John handled the situation, using his influence to bring attention to the problem rather than letting it fade into the background, like so many other stories. It's about time someone who could make a difference spoke up, one community member says. Too many of us don't get that chance. Protests start to emerge in the streets, peaceful yet powerful. Signs read, "End racial profiling, justice for all, and we stand with John." The message is clear. People want change, and they're tired of waiting for it. John's story has become a symbol of a much larger fight for justice and equality, one that has been ongoing for decades. On the other side, law enforcement is put under a microscope. Daniel's case sparks debates about training, accountability, and reform. Some officers support the push for change, admitting that the culture within many departments allows for bias to go unchecked. Others, however, push back, arguing that incidents like this are rare and that most officers are just doing their jobs. The divide between those wanting reform and those resistant to change becomes more apparent as the public demands more transparency and accountability from the police. But it's not just the police who are being scrutinized. The justice system as a whole is being questioned. How complaints against officers are handled, how often misconduct is overlooked, and what steps are being taken to prevent future incidents. Daniels may be facing the consequences of his actions, but the system that enabled him is still intact, and people are calling for it to be dismantled. Conclusion. As the dust settles, one thing is clear. This isn't just a story about one man and one cop. It's a story about what happens when prejudice and power collide, and how those moments can expose the flaws in a much larger system. John's calm, composed reaction in the face of injustice became the key to unraveling the truth, not just about Officer Daniels, but about the system that allowed this to happen in the first place. The lesson here is bigger than just one wrongful arrest. It's a reminder that no one should be judged by the color of their skin. Don't forget to subscribe, for more videos like these.